to ensure the entirety of the property is protected in perpetuity and public ownership with respect for its ecological, recreational, and educational functions, and to serve as a fiscal mechanism through which the district via a tax levy will repay the city of Bellingham for the Greenways Endowment Fund loan. Welcome, commissioners and citizens. Per Chapter 4230 of the Revised Code of Washington, Open Public Meetings Act, this meeting is now open to the public. Due to the COVID outbreak and the governor's stay-at-home order, this meeting will be conducted online via Zoom. A visual and audio recording of this meeting will be posted on the website. If your camera is on during the meeting, your voice, likeness, and surroundings will be publicly available and viewable on the website. If you choose to speak with your camera off or by calling on a telephone, only your voice will be recorded. May I have a roll call? Frank James is excused for the moment. He will be with us perhaps around 8 o'clock, maybe a little sooner, probably not. John Hymas.
Here.
Hugh Beatty.
Here.
John McLaughlin.
Present.
John Brown is here. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting?
I move we approve the agenda.
Okay.
I'll second.
Who seconds?
Hymas.
Hymas seconds. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, we'll vote on that. All those in favor of approving the agenda for today's meeting, please say aye.
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 Aye, 4-0, one abstention. I would like to mention to all of the commissioners that we are obliged by April 15th. Robin has notified us of this, that we have to turn in an F1, a financial affairs disclosure. We have to turn that in by April 15th. Okay, you all know that.
Yeah.
Those who wish to be acknowledged, including legal counsel and secretary.
Robin Albro.
Bob Carmichael.
Hello.
Vince Abichunas.
Mr. Hartnell, you are there. We see you. We hope you are well.
Hi.
Okay.
Pardon my latency, please.
Hi, Richard.
Okay. I have wondered whether it would be a good idea at this point to have public comment for 3 minutes and to approve the minutes for the meeting of our last meeting in February, or to hop right into the old business. I'm not sure how to proceed. Most of the discussion tonight will be about the proposed revisions to the city's outline for the master plan. Have all the commissioners looked over the minutes for the last meeting?
Yes.
Right, we take care of that right now. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for the last meeting?
I move we approve the minutes from the last meeting in
Okay, second.
February.
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes for the February 24th meeting signify by saying aye.
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 Or nay? I say aye, it passes 4-0.
Actually, 3-0 to 1 with one abstention.
May I ask your fine reason, sir?
I was not present at that meeting.
Robin, will you please make a note of that John McLaughlin was not present? Okay, thank you. Okay. Is there anything, it seems to me, Bob, that we might have a public comment period at this time for 3 minutes, or we can hold it off until we get through much of our other business.
That's up to the chair.
Okay, without any, if there are no other ideas about that, I'd like to open the thing up to public comment for 3 minutes for those of you who would like to say something. Mr. Survey or Mr. Richard Hartnell. Okay.
Thank you, but no, I have nothing, no comments.
Thank you, John.
Just an off record warm hello to people in the community who I know and those who I don't.
Okay. Good to have you here.
Long
Without-
time no see, Richard.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I don't want to distract from business, but I moved to town last year and it looks like I'm sitting in place for another minute. So yeah, I
Okay,
figured I'd maybe get involved.
well, our main business tonight, we may as well turn to old business, proposed revisions to the master plan outline, discussion of those revisions to the city's outline for the master plan. Lane Potter and has been working on them, and we have John McLaughlin, our distinguished environmentalist and scientist, has submitted to all of us a master plan outline offered by the commissioner, a draft of it. And I don't know if have you had a chance to take a look at it, Hugh and John, and you and John Hyman?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's extremely thorough, and I think that without we don't just want to rubber stamp it and say this is what we're going to say, but we do want to make comments on it. Perhaps John would like to lead off with a few remarks, and we would like to get the input of Bob Carmichael.
Certainly, and thank you. Much of the guiding principles I used to develop this were confirmed with a conversation today with Jerry Wilbur, who has, I think, more experience in park master planning and trail planning than all the rest of us put together. But one of the things he emphasized is that any park master plan, if it is to succeed, really needs to begin with the public, right? It's the public who really own and use the park. And the master plan should reflect their interests and values. And so I didn't see enough of that in the outline provided by the Parks Department. And so I tried to include that here, both in at the very beginning, defining the stakeholder participation process, and then before any decisions are made, a definition of the community vision, values, interests, and goals. We can rearrange all that, but I would like the emphasis of the public interests, the public values, and the public vision to really be prominent, not be lost in the length or detail of any outline. And I think the commission has taken a good step on that in the two public hearings we've had about trail designs, and in our monthly meetings, in which we start with, after our statement of our mission, we start with public input. And so I think we've tried to include public input early and often, and I would encourage us to continue to do so, and to encourage the Parks Department to do so throughout the master planning process. All right, and then I guess finally, one of the things Jerry mentioned is that a park master plan will work better or worse, or not work at all, depending upon how well it aligns with the community and the community values. And in fact, he mentioned in particular an issue very relevant to us. If we're going to close some trails because they are either redundant, they're impactful, causing problems, or for whatever variety of reasons. And we understand that whatever final trail plan we come up with is going to involve closing some trails and realigning other trails so they work better. He said there are two approaches that other groups have taken. And one is to emphasize and put your resources, your money, and your planning into developing a trail network that works, that minimizes impact, that serves the interest and the needs, where people want to go. Or you can spend a lot of resources and money on enforcement to make sure a trail that is closed remains closed and isn't used. And I think he said it, the ratio of expenses is about 10 to 1. Whereas if you develop a design that works, then people are going to use it and it's going to be effective. Or you can, if you have a poorly designed trail system that doesn't align with community values, people are going to try and use closed areas anyway, and you're going to spend an awful lot of resources on enforcement and just increase frustration all the way around. So I would encourage us to work with the city to do the former. And again, that starts with gathering, working with, defining, outlining community values, vision.
John, on the second page of your master plan outline draft, you have connections, 6.10, period 10,
Mhm.
and you have trail networks. I wonder if Jerry's ideas and your own consensus with this, I wonder if your ideas could be put at that point. Is that? something you
That
wanted-
connections part is really, it was fairly well expressed by Tip and a couple others of how is the Chuckanut Community Forest Trail Network going to connect with areas outside of that property. And so people are getting to it somehow and may want to continue on a hike or a bike ride or whatever it is they're doing, may want to continue outside of it. And so it'd be helpful if it connected well, or integrated with the larger network. Bellingham Parks Department is dealing with a very large number of parks and public open space, and whatever we do ought to align well with them. And so I think that's where that's coming in. That's where the connection is coming in. I think what would be more relevant to my initial comments would be really the stakeholder participation process and community vision, values, interests, and goals. And those would then, that's part 5, which then defined part 6, the desired future conditions, which then leads into step 7. How do you get to the desired future conditions from where we are now?
Sure.
On this, I spoke with John Blethyn a couple days ago, and we were talking about the city through Greenways has acquired quite a bit of land sort of adjacent to the forest and from various times, but yet they never did a master plan for any of this stuff. So if they're doing a master plan now, they should definitely make sure that connections are made in this master plan to the little pieces of property that they have acquired, like Hoag's Pond and some of the little parcels near the interurban and places. And I'm not aware of all of them, but they know what they own, and they should have planned for it when they bought it. That should have been in part of the process, but apparently it wasn't done yet.
I don't know how we are going to proceed on that point, Hugh. Tip Johnson also had some ideas, and so did John Blethyn, about including other properties or showing sensitivity in the plan to other conservation areas. It was Frank's idea, and I tend to agree with this, that so far as possible, we should focus on what we're doing here on the master plan on this property, which is not to ignore what you're saying. How that can be fitted in at some point, I don't know. But we could bring it up in one of our meetings, the steering committee. We could bring that up and try to include it. I'm wondering, Mike, let me put it as a question. I'm wondering, the document that we're looking at right now is John McLaughlin's draft expansion of what Lane Potter has given us. And we are going to have to submit this, submit John's suggestions to the Parks Department within a couple of weeks of tonight's meeting. We're going to give them our ideas about everything that can be put in. How we are going to introduce your idea into that, I don't know.
Well, I think it just be under 6.10 connections, So just so they're stated that there are these particular pieces of property that the city owns and was acquired through Greenways. And that's all. Yeah, it should be listed in it.
So
Okay.
if I may, one way of addressing that would be when we get to the trail criteria. Some of the criteria I developed was that whatever network design we have, it has to connect to all 6 access points. Those access points are connections to surrounding areas. And so as long as we do that, then we've achieved this goal of connectivity to adjacent properties.
Can I say something?
Yes,
Hello?
hello,
Yeah,
please talk.
so I'm wondering how would the conservation easement work with, say, Hogs Pond or Arroyo Park or some of the other pieces nearby and connected? That's what I was wondering. And there was a wonderful story in the Seattle Times Sunday on the front page. It was saving Washington forests for carbon storage, not logging. And it's all about conservation now to sequester carbon in a lot of the forests around the state. But anyway, I talked to John Bleffin about this Sunday, and that's another reason why possibly we can connect this all together. But I'm not sure. Maybe our lawyer would have a better idea on how the conservation easement might be expanded.
Is Bob Carmichael with us?
I'm here.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
yes,
Yes.
I think expanding the scope of the conservation easement is going to be difficult. I suppose it could be done, but it will take some change in will on the part of the city to want to do that and include these other properties. What I was thinking, listening to what everybody has said, is that we're pretty close to a consensus that this document, this master plan, should mention the other properties, the adjacent properties, at least mention them as adjoining properties. Perhaps plan the trail network for connections to those properties. That makes good sense. Perhaps identify the existence of wildlife corridors made possible through not just the community forest, but the adjacent properties. But to stop short of getting into the detailed analysis of the master plan that will go into the community forest if the park board has its way. I don't think we're in a position to do a master plan for all the adjoining properties. If we were to, I mean, we could certainly talk to the Parks Department about that, but that's well beyond, I suspect, what they were contemplating. And my guess is that's a bigger effort to make that happen. To me, there's a lot to do in the community forest. And I am concerned that if we start focusing too much on the adjoining properties, it's the same, it's a little bit similar to the concern I had about Fairhaven Park. It's very different in that I know those other properties are compatible in functions and values. We need to look at them together. You know, the animals certainly don't recognize the boundaries, and we need to make sure that the trails connect in a sensible way. And so I do think there's a place in this plan to have a section that talks about those things with respect to offsite properties. But I do think we will be better off in the long run recognizing that the focus of this master plan really is the Chuckanut Community Forest. And so when we're talking about some of the things that John has in his email on the site history and the current, the history of the property and the status of the natural features in 3 and 4, I think those should be focused primarily on the forest. And of course, to the extent we're talking about trail networks, we would mention the off-site properties. The one thing we haven't really talked about, and I think that the idea of having the board maybe approve this draft for purposes of sharing with the Parks Department in a couple of weeks is a good idea. But I'm very much in agreement with John McLaughlin and what Jerry Wilbur has apparently advised, which is making sure that the planning doesn't get too far ahead of public input, that the public really needs to weigh in on these things. So I think from a standpoint of moving this forward, it would make sense to share this with the city, with the idea of collaborating with the city. How are we going to move the public process forward and make sure that the public is on board with the items in the draft master plan outline? I think it warrants a hearing, at minimum, a public hearing. And it's really, this is really a city park. So it's more than just, it's something that the Parks Department should probably participate in, because it's beyond our district. It's a city park. This is how they're going to manage it. So there should be notice sent out probably to everybody in the city about how this master planning process is being contemplated, and get as much public involvement as possible. I think very quickly, one of the issues on the table is going to be that the $25,000 the city has set aside for this is not going to be enough to cover the level of detail that I think our board would probably like to see here. And so we may need to talk about whether the Park District should consider using some of its own funds to study some of these topics that could be included in the master plan. I don't think $25,000 is going to cover everything in here. I think it's going to be a lot more than that if we do try to include all these things. And maybe there needs to be some discussion about the scope of it and how much detail we'll get into. And then, of course, talk about who would be hired to do that work. But I think all those things need to be considered sequentially. Probably the first thing is to get the board's agreement that John's outline is one that it would like to present to the city's Parks Department in a couple of weeks to discuss how to move forward with it.
That's kind of what I hoped for from you, Bob, to give a sort of conceptual feel of what we should be doing tonight. And I'm not proposing that we simply rubber stamp what John has said and then forward that to your office to dress it up a little bit and make it presentable to the city, or just for John to forward an attachment, his attachment of his master plan outline, to forward it to the city and say, what do you think?
Right on.
Lane Potter has put forth this. Now we have put forth this. I'm trying to imagine what our step here should be. We don't have, most of us, the expertise to improve upon John's overall presentation, which seems to me pretty excellent. I thought Lane's was excellent. It maybe thought a little bit thin, and we had some issues with it. We wanted to add things, but what steps should we take right now? If if you just think about that for a moment so far, but I have a side question, and that is regarding the money, Bob. They have proposed $25,000. Is it worth thinking in terms of letting the city propose a dollar figure for what we should toss in?
Well-
Or should we propose it?
Let me make a suggestion on your first question first. We're already in March, almost coming into April, and there's an awful lot to be done here if we're going to try to achieve something like what's in John's outline. My suggestion, rather than wait for a formal resolution to be prepared and voted on at the next meeting, my suggestion would be to have if the commissioners are in favor of moving this outline forward to the Parks Department, to have the board propose a motion and vote on a motion to do just that. Not a resolution, just we have this outline in the record, have the board vote on a motion to present this master plan outline to the City Parks Department at its next steering committee meeting. And leave it at that. You might say that with that the board approves the draft, if the board wants to approve the draft, but it may even be a little bit early for that. I think it's the members of the steering committee for the Parks District, if it's clear their support, can certainly represent to the Parks Department that there's support for this outline with the Parks Board, that the Parks Board likes it. They voted to forward it to the Parks Department for discussion at the next meeting. And then there can be a robust discussion and consideration of this plan between the steering committee and the Parks Department at the next meeting. And some of the next steps can be identified there. I'm not sure it makes a lot of sense to try to get into all the next steps at this meeting, because as you all know, this is the City of Bellingham's master plan. They're ultimately the ones who are going to decide what goes in this master plan. And we are going to have to work with them and hopefully not against them. So I think the first step, since you're asking that, Commissioner Brown, the first step I think is passing a motion to that the board is authorizing the forwarding of this master plan to the City Parks Department for review and discussion at the next steering committee meeting. And then after that, when you're asking about the funding, I think that that's a discussion too that should take place at the steering committee. If one of the things I talked to Frank James about before the meeting, he did call me. I said it might make sense to at least make a contact with the author of our baseline study and see if Ann Eisinger would have any ideas about how to help achieve some of the goals that's set out in this outline, and perhaps even be interested in doing some of the work and maybe getting an idea of how much that might cost. I don't think there's a problem with doing that. We couldn't make any commitments, obviously, and the city may want to put it out to a wider array of individuals in a selection process if they agree to retain a consultant to do some of this work. Obviously, before that, the scope of work would need to be negotiated, an estimate of the amount of, what the budget would be. All of those things need to be discussed with the city. So I don't think we can do much along those lines, except perhaps make an initial contact with the author of our baseline study to loop her in maybe she can help inform our steering committee representatives, what they might, what some of the questions might be and some of the points might be at the steering committee meeting with the city.
That's a very good suggestion. Immediately before us is the question, John McLaughlin and John Hymas and Hugh Beatty. Immediately before us is whether we should act. Hugh and John Hymas and I, we don't have, it's not presumptuous, is it, to say that we don't have the expertise that Mr. McLaughlin has, and we would not feel confident putting together this kind of master plan outline ourselves. Not to rubber stamp it again, but to authorize the presentation of this. Hugh and John and John Hymas and John McLaughlin, would you feel confident? Would you feel comfortable in presenting this outline that John has put forward, presenting it to the Parks Department?
I would.
Yes, I would. I want to say, though, that I do have a little bit of expertise in planning. I trained under Ernie Gade, who was the planner at Huxley many years ago. And I've been involved in quite a few
That will be very valuable to you.
comprehensive plans over the years.
I shouldn't neglect that. Thank you.
And we have Wendy also in our neighborhood
Sure.
is a very good planner. Worked for the city years and years as a planner.
John McLaughlin, do you have any? Hugh, your comments are taken note of, and I'll remember that the next time I speak with you and involve you in this. John, do you have anything? If you had to submit this outline that you've put together, if you had to give it to the city tonight, would you feel comfortable, or do you want to add more?
I would feel more comfortable if it was vetted by someone with actual experience in master planning. So someone like Jerry Wilbur, Ken Wilcox, I don't know Wendy Scherer's experience, but someone who's actually done this before and knows about what works and what doesn't. So if there are any glaring omissions or revisions needed, I'm also sensitive to, if we do have to hire a consultant, some of those very same people might be good candidates, and I wouldn't want to create a conflict of interest and have them be excluded from the candidate pool.
But in the interest of moving this forward, John, would you think that it might be a possible idea to present your master plan outline to Jerry, to Wendy, to the other person you mentioned, whose name I forgot, to present it to them and to get their input, and then to make what revisions you want?
That would be great.
Well, that would be great, John, except that we don't want to meet between now and the next meeting.
Mhm.
And how do we handle that?
We could put a contingency, right? So we could have, again, was my best shot with limited time and mental bandwidth. We could approve it contingent upon any revisions suggested by people we recognize.
I like that. Is that square with you, Bob?
It's hard to say that the Parks District is really putting it forward if the Parks District Board hasn't seen what's coming forward. If this was not such a public document, I would be more comfortable with a contingency like that. And I'm sure that the net positives are there with the people John mentioned reviewing it. I just don't know how you can approve something for presentation. That, again, you're not really approving it. You're just authorizing its presentation.
This is Frank. Bob, could I put forward an idea? I just arrived on the mainland and jumped on my computer.
Okay.
But could we assign this to a subcommittee of the board who would have the authority to take this and improve upon it with consultation with outside experts and then present it to the board? Would that be an
Present it
appropriate
to the Parks
strategy?
Department.
Or-
Present
yeah,
it, you mean
yeah.
to the Parks, okay.
Right, excuse me, yes. Bob, process-wise, is that something we can do to have a sub?
Yes, that's probably a little better. You then would be delegating. You should name the member. I assume they're going to be the same as the steering committee. You would delegate the authority of the Parks Board to this subcommittee, which is the steering committee, to present a final, not a final, but a draft master plan outline to the Parks Department. And then,
Well, in recognition of the fact that this is still something that's totally contingent upon the Parks Department modifying and agreeing to it and negotiating about it. I mean, this isn't a final product, I don't think. Yeah.
No, it's a draft. I think we would need to be transparent, though, then, that this is not the outline that was necessarily authorized for presentation by the Park District Board. So the motion is a little different, and what's being presented to the City Parks Department is a little different. Can it be done? Yeah.
If there's value and merit in review, why don't we circulate it and have a telephone vote on approving it by the board?
Frank, is that getting a little bit too complicated? I don't mean to add another layer of discussion, because you're apprehending all of this very well. Bob's initial suggestion was that we present this as John has put it. John suggested that he would feel more comfortable if others reviewed it. My suggestion is that we present it to the Parks Department. We simply authorize its presentation, understanding, as we all do, that in the steering committee, we are going to bring further ideas forward from Jerry Wilbur and Wendy Scherer and whomever else, and further thoughts by John, by you, by Bob, by anyone. But just for the moment, in the interests of celerity of getting this thing on the road, do you think that we could present what John has given us? That we could authorize its presentation to the Parks Department?
Well, I see two options. One is to present what John has already developed and to the Parks Department and approve that tonight by a vote of our board. The alternative would be to have the subgroup that's going to be working with the Parks Board present a plan that was evaluated and improved on and approved by a vote by phone, which I think is also pretty functional. I mean, that's a pretty reasonable process, I think, that would have the force of being approved by the park commissioners, and also would have the opportunity of getting that additional input.
So, Commissioner James, my input on that, I think if you want to go that direction, and it's obviously the pleasure of the board, it certainly can be done that way. My suggestion was to try to move it along so the discussion doesn't get delayed. But if we can actually accomplish the review that you're talking about and have another vote before the next steering committee meeting and have a better document, that makes sense to me. My suggestion, though, would be, and this requires the board to agree, there's no intermediate like, oh, we're going to have a phone vote here. You've either got an open public meeting or you don't have an open public meeting. And so if you're going to take a vote, it has to be at an open public meeting. That can be done by Zoom. It doesn't take much to schedule these. And in this day and age, Zoom seems to work as well as telephone conferences. You would need to give the public at least 24 hours advance notice of special meeting. You could probably set it tonight, have Robin schedule it, maybe but it would then be at a date that everybody could attend before your next steering committee meeting with the city. And there would hopefully be the ability then to get comments for additional input for that special meeting. And the special meeting, if you have a special meeting, we really haven't had many. If you have a special meeting, you can only talk about the subject that's listed in the agenda, not other things. So it would just be a special meeting for the purpose of considering the master plan outline to be presented to the City Parks Department. So if there's energy and interest in doing that, that is how it would be done.
So it sounds like we have two alternatives. One is to present the current draft as John has prepared it, knowing that it is just a draft and can and will be further modified, and engage those people in the meantime to begin to think about it and perhaps present those ideas to us so that we could add them, or to have a special meeting specifically for the purpose of this to review and approve it in a modified form. Those are the two choices.
Yes.
What do people think?
I'm in favor, Frank, of going ahead in the way that Bob presented. You're giving an excellent plan. I'm thinking that Jerry's advice and Wendy Scherer's advice and John's own further thoughts, that these can be taken up in a steering committee. The steering committee has not met yet, but it will meet. And the ideas, and you will be there, and we'll have further comments from John. And at that point, we can bring up Jerry Wilbur's ideas, John's further reflections, anyone else's ideas. We can bring up the peer review and add that to the discussion in the when the steering committee first meets. That's just my thought, that we should move ahead with this, what John has presented tonight. But I'm just one voice.
You want to hear my voice?
Yeah.
No. Yes.
I say we submit John's proposal as a draft, as is, and then wait for response. We're early on in this process. It's hard to say how long this is going to drag out, but it's going to include public meetings and steering committee and lots of other input, not just the few people that were mentioned, but maybe 100 people from the community surrounding the park. So let's start, let's not get caught up in special meetings and stuff. Let's just, it's a great draft, and we'll see what the response is.
Well, McLaughlin, and after you, Hugh. Are you okay with that?
Sure.
Hugh? Mr. Beatty, you're in mute.
I'm okay with going ahead with it right away, and Robin could make some copies of it and deliver one to Wendy and deliver one to Jerry, and they can look it over and send it in to the park board.
Or send it in to us, and we can give it to the steering committee.
Whatever.
I'm going to make a motion by your leave, Frank, unless you'd like to take this over. I'm going to make a motion that we authorize the presentation. We don't approve, but we are simply authorizing the presentation. Would somebody make a motion to authorize the presentation of this draft to the Parks Department?
I'll move.
And this is the park board, right?
Yes. To the Parks Board.
I'll second that.
Department. Yeah.
Oh.
Department.
I'm not hearing someone. Could we then have a vote? If there's no further discussion, could we have a vote on the motion to authorize the presentation of what Mr. McLaughlin has put forward to the Parks Department?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I heard the motion. Who from John Hymas? Who made the second? Who gave the second to the motion?
Hugh Beatty.
I'll second it. I wasn't clear about if it's the park board or the park department.
Department.
It's a
Nicole
motion
Oliver
of
and
the
and
park
Lon.
board.
I would think that it would, you might want to direct it to the steering committee. The park board will approve a master plan, but they're not going to deal with, I don't think that the park board is who you want to talk to. Either want to talk to park staff or the steering committee. That's where I'd direct it.
I agree, John Blethyn. I would say the steering committee.
And I agree with that too.
Me too.
All right.
Okay,
So I'll
the
second
steering-
it with steering committee then.
Okay, the steering committee at this time is being headed up by Lane Potter. So this would go to Lane Potter with a, say, a CC to Nicole Oliver.
Sounds good.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Uh,
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Okay, it passes 5-0. Robin Albro, you're taking all of this down? Good. Well, that brings us to the next order of business. We are moving forward on the revision on the outline that John McLaughlin has given us. The next item on the agenda is the discussion of the trail plans evaluation criteria, which John McLaughlin has drawn up in an email submitted to the board in the last hour or so. Wonderful email. Do we want to discuss that?
I thought we just did.
We discussed the master plan, but we're now talking about under the agenda, the trail plans evaluation criteria. Well, that as I understand it, will eventually be worked into the draft that we have just approved, John. Is that correct? Or not approved, but authorized for presentation.
Yes, the criteria relate to the master plan or its outline in two ways. One is the trail criteria should be an expression of public values. And then the second, they would guide the alignment of the actual trail plan. And here's, I think, a little bit of where it reveals some of the difference between the process we're envisioning and the process the Parks Department has come up with. The Parks Department came up with their criteria using what I think is their professional judgment, which in many cases is very good. Our criteria included some professional judgment, but was largely based on public input and results of a public hearing.
2 hearings.
Right.
The other difference is that we looked at criteria, not just at outcomes.
Mhm.
And I think that's an important differentiation.
We are discussing this right now, Frank and John. What is the procedure that we're trying to follow right here? What do we want to do with what John McLaughlin has come up with?
I have a question. I wonder, since this criteria that John sent out I received it at 5:48 PM tonight, so 12 minutes before the meeting. I'm not sure all the commissioners have even seen it. John Hymas, Hugh Beatty, Frank James, John Brown, have you seen this?
I have seen it. I haven't read it thoroughly.
I looked at the email on my phone, but I can't open to get to the PDF with it for some reason.
Are we delaying anything by bumping this to the meeting next month?
I don't think there's an actual action we would take with this. This is really, again, this is nothing we would have to decide upon immediately. This is really informing the master planning process.
Right.
It's a critical component of it, but
I agree with John.
again, it's informing the master planning process, and ideally, this would really get a careful work over by people who have done trail network designs and have done trail building and trail restoration and removal and all that. So this is where we really need the input of people who've done this professionally. And that's going to include Parks Department staff. And it would also, I would strongly urge us to consult, again, Jerry Wilbur and Ken Wilcox, because these are the people that know what they're doing and know the area.
My vision of what tonight's meeting is about is for John to explain this to us. You know, and we've had the narrative. Some people had a chance to look at it, some haven't. I think, John, if you could explain to us the importance of this and what it is, I think we could then be in a position to discern what it is we should do with it. What I was anticipating was a summary of the two hearings and a summary of the planning process that went into them and the criteria that emerged and some specific recommendations. So I would favor a bit of time in the meeting right now for John to go over this quickly and to point out the highlights of it so that we'll know what it is and what we could do with it and have some opportunity to ask questions.
Very good.
Sure, I can do that.
Please.
Thank you, John.
So we held 2 public hearings and we've had a number of comments during our regular monthly meetings about trails and impacts and that sort of thing. The first public hearing was to review, we presented plans from a conservation course I taught, and I selected what I thought were the 5 best plans that the students prepared. And then I spent a hearing, a very well-attended hearing. It was standing room only, and I forget how many hours of input we had, but the public provided some very thoughtful comments. Not all of them were compatible with each other, so they revealed areas of discord. And they also spent a lot of time talking about things we had not even considered, and particularly whether bikes would be allowed and how and where, and all kinds of issues about dogs, leashing, dog waste, and that sort of thing. And the result of that is what Robin, I think, just brought up, is a summary of the main public values and desires they had for any trail network we come up with. There are a few other things, but these are the main ones. From these, I then developed a second set of design criteria and actual requirements. Public sentiment about some things was so strong, I elevated some criteria to requirements. Any design had to meet those requirements. And then others would be expressed as criteria, which are really criteria to meet various objectives. The criteria I came up with are measurable. And so you can take a trail design, whether it's the one the park developed or one of the ones any of the students developed, subject it to these criteria and actually come up with numbers and score how well a trail network works relative to these criteria. And then from that, you can make decisions about which criteria to go with. The Parks Department came up with, or Lane shared with me, I know how much of these are her ideas and how much are discussion coming from Parks Department staff, but they came up with their criteria. And this is after both rounds of our processes in my course products. And they shared really a set of considerations that they would give. And those are largely questions that they would ask something, and they largely lead to binary answers. And so you could get multiple designs coming up really with the same results. And so in that sense, it might be hard to distinguish between those. So for example, can this trail be maintained? You could get a yes for multiple different designs and really no way to figure out which one is better than the other. So it's really 2 different approaches to criteria. The criteria that I developed for my course are fairly transparent and fairly objective. The ones the Parks Department came up with really rely a lot more on professional judgment, and you have advantages and disadvantages of both approaches. Regardless, we had a second public hearing on the designs that students came up with relative to the second set of requirements and criteria. That was under COVID and Zoom, and so the participation wasn't nearly as great as it was before. In any case, that's where we got to where we are. I think it's still a long way from actually doing anything with these. The Parks Department came up with their design, I think with largely implicit criteria, without clearly stating what it is they were doing. And I think their design contains a lot of really good elements. But again, it's an internal process, and I think what we're advocating for is more of a public process.
John, how do we bridge the gap between what the public said and what the criteria that your students have been focusing on and the park department professional judgment? How do we blend those together to get an end result?
I think we can, our best approach might be to appeal to the better judgment of the professional park staff. They want something that works, I hope. And I think what Jerry Wilbur has shared with me is, depending upon how you do it, it's going to work or it's not. And even an excellent design or an excellent plan is not going to work if the public doesn't trust it. And they won't trust it if it's presented to them as a fait accompli. Whereas they will trust it if they see their work written all over it. And so I think we can appeal to the Parks Department that, look, we want this to succeed and you want it to succeed. And in order to succeed, we have to engage the public early and often, and end up with a trail network and other components of the master plan that actually work. Because we see right now what happens when you have something that doesn't work, right? You have trail proliferation all over. You've got festering conflicts between cyclists and dog walkers and other users. You have ecological degradation of the place, violations of the conservation easement. It's not working right now. And the master plan is the opportunity to do it right, to do it well. And to do that, we really must engage the public and people who've had experience doing this and seeing what works and what doesn't in other places. We don't have to make the same mistakes that have made elsewhere. So I guess in summary, what I would do is to leverage the experience of people who've done a lot of master planning in places like this in other places and appeal to the Parks Department's interest in something that works.
You want this reviewed by Jerry Wilbur, of course.
Which?
You want the trail criteria or the department trail criteria. You want all of this reviewed by Jerry Wilbur, or has he already looked at it?
I sent it to him, probably not with enough time for him to really go over it. But I would strongly urge any trail design and even the process for developing a trail design to have first input from the public of what they want. And we've already done quite a bit of that.
Yes.
But we could use more. And then the participation, if not leadership, from people like Jerry Wilbur or Ken Wilcox, and maybe some others that I don't know, who have experience doing this, particularly in open space, as opposed to manicured parks.
John, are you thinking we're looking at Jerry Wilbur and Ken Wilcox to volunteer their time, or are you thinking they should be hired to do a professional review?
I understand both are retired, but there are lots of other things they could do with their lives. And I think we ought to respect their professional competence and contribution. So if they would like some sort of compensation, I think we ought to give it to them. And I think our interest and in fact, our mandate for stewardship and protection of this place would justify some sort of payment.
It seems like a topic for the steering committee with the city parks department as well.
Yep. I mean, basically, we can present this as we are looking to help them, almost to do them a favor. They've got a bit of a nightmare or a very frustrating property on their hands that they're responsible for. And we can offer to help them to resolve that and to turn this into a positive instead of a frustration.
Nice thought. Well, could this be taken up with the steering committee when we do meet, when Lane Potter finally gets us all together? I don't know what action we can take right now, other than you're submitting this to Jerry and to Ken and suggesting to them that there might be some compensation down the road for their involvement. I don't know what action we're supposed to take right now.
I don't think there is an action to take right now.
Okay. If there's no action, we've had a very good explanation of this from John. John's walked us through the whole 2 pages of the document that he put together. I'm assuming
I'd like to commend John on the extensive amount of work that he's put into this, not just to prepare this document, but the entire process through 2 very extensive efforts to design and 2 very substantial processes of public involvement. John, I really appreciate the work you've done, and I think we have a much more sophisticated product than would be otherwise available for consideration for the long-term plan. And I wanted to acknowledge and thank you for that too.
Hear, hear. Yes.
I also think that we should recommend that our representatives of the steering committee actually take this forward with them for presentation to the steering committee for its consideration.
That will definitely be done by you and me, Frank. We would want the steering committee. Yeah. Lane Potter with the Parks Department is going to let us know about how that steering committee is going to be formed. We have our people, other people will be involved. Robin Albro.
Maybe Jerry has made a number of comments on the chat along with this. I don't know if you all have seen that or if you just would want to give a moment to Jerry to summarize what he's been saying.
Could I first take just 1 minute to talk about process? I mean, the city has envisioned this as a process in which we are not co-equal with the city, which I believe is actually the fact. Rather, I believe they see us as one amongst many stakeholders. And I think that's something we should get more clarity about. I do not believe that we're just another stakeholder in this venture. I believe that we are co-equal partners in this venture with the city. I think that's reflected by the entire history of the effort, by the amount of financial input that's been provided for this project, millions of dollars. I really think we need to not just accept the city's designation of what we should do. I think we should assert that we are in fact co-equal partners in this process and take a leadership role in designing the process and in participating in the outcomes. So I think I would take a little bit issue of us accepting what the city is telling us to do.
I don't think anybody believes that we should accept what the city's telling us to do. And I think that your idea, Frank, of taking a forward, proactive step on this, that this will emerge more and more as we go on, and especially in discussions with the steering committee. I hope it will.
I think we should be convening those meetings.
We can't hear.
Bob, is there Bob, is there a framework for this that we suggest this in?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Bob,
Frank is asking whether or not there is a timeline for the first meeting of the steering committee, and is there some timeline process? And Lane Potter has not come up with anything yet. I can contact her and urge her to get some kind of a timeline going. If we've discussed this enough, we might move on in the agenda to the interlocal agreement for payroll service. I don't understand any of that, Robin. Why don't you explain it and tell us what we're supposed to do?
You're muted, Robin, you're muted.
Okay, can you,
Yeah, I've got it. Thank you, Bob.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to say, maybe, John Blethyn is an old veteran of Park Board, past master plans. And I don't think anyone has taken an initiative towards a master plan as much as we have. And so I think that we are pushing it to the city now. So, and it seemed like a year ago or something, I heard that Leslie Bryson said that they had planned on spending $100,000 on this master plan. And that's why they were kind of whining about why they couldn't do it sooner. But I don't think, I can't remember a master plan in the past, and John Blethyn may know better, but that was pushed more by the people surrounding the parks that wanted the plan. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in.
Okay,
When I comment, I just spent 2.5 hours on the foot of Cornwall Park, and I believe I was the only I was the only member of the public. Everyone else was paid. So yeah,
Okay.
there's big disparities, and there'll be a lot of interest. Now, obviously, the South Side made this happen. This is important. I personally feel that we need to include all the property, and make the city pony up to deal with all the greenways property that was bought for the same exact reason that you guys made the Chuckanut Forest happen. And we ought to have one heck of a community forest down there. I would not call it a park. I would never call it a park, because in this town, parks means playgrounds.
Good point. All right.
okay. With that said, I wonder if we might, this interlocal agreement for payroll service, is this just something that, a document that we should be pushing forward? We should all agree on it. What does the document say, Robin? What does it allow for?
It's the exact same agreement that you guys have signed in the past. It just allows for payroll services and for me, and there is no change in the document from what was done before. So you just need to approve it so the county will keep paying payroll for me.
Do we have to sign anything? Any one of us have to sign anything?
Yes, everybody, and I will arrange after the meeting or tomorrow to come bring it by to people to have you sign.
Okay, would somebody make a motion to approve the agreement submitted by the city, the interlocal agreement? Will somebody make a motion to approve that?
I make a motion to approve the agreement with the county.
I second it. And Frank seconds.
Okay, any discussion?
Yes, I have a question on item 4 on page 1. It says under administration, it's going to be administered by Brad Bennett for the county, and I think that's me for the district. Is that accurate?
We've changed that to be Frank.
Okay.
I sent a new copy out just before the meeting. So.
Okay.
I see the correction.
Okay, all those in favor with that point noted, John McLaughlin's point, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, passes 5-0. We have an upcoming meeting in April on invasive species in the Chuckanut Community Forest. Invitations have been sent. Is there anything that anyone would like to point out on that?
Let me pull up my notes and I will just talk about that really briefly. Oh, one thing that we were going to talk about was the fact that the South neighborhood has their meeting on the same day and which starting at 7 o'clock. So if we're going to keep it on that same day, April 27th, then it would be good if we could start it right away at the beginning so that any people from the South neighborhood can leave and go to their own meeting at 7 o'clock.
Duly noted. Duly
Excuse
noted.
me, that's April 28th on my calendar, Wednesday.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I just said the wrong day. I've been, yeah, 28th. Then the other thing just about that meeting is I sent the email to you all, and Laurel Baldwin, who's the staff member with the noxious weed program for Whatcom County, is planning to attend, and possibly one of the members from the noxious weed board will also be coming. And Laurel said she was gonna maybe try and take a hike through there before the April meeting, just to see what kind of noxious weeds are in there. And let's see, Jerry Wilbur was invited to that as well. And then Annalise also, she said she didn't know that she would be the most appropriate resource for noxious weed management, but she says she can provide other information that may be useful in our master planning efforts. She said she can provide scientific information on the forest wildlife, wetland, and water quality to help inform your decision. And they're going to have new data from their urban forestry management plan assessment on wildlife corridors, forest structure, restoration opportunities, and fire risks. And that's going to be coming out in late April or early May. And she said to let her know if we would like her to attend and share that information. I'm not sure where, if we want to do that as part of the restoration public hearing, or if we'd like to have her come to the April meeting and present some of that information, though she might not have it in April, so.
If she does, it might be a nice idea to invite her, for her to be there.
I did invite her to the invasive plants meeting,
Okay,
but yeah, I can invite her to and I did invite her actually to the restoration.
okay, we have a public
as
hearing on
well.
restoration at the May or the June board meeting. That's old business. If there are no further comments on any of these things, have we already had a public comment period of each person speaking for 3 minutes? I've forgotten.
Well, do we want to just, we agreed to do the invasive species or plants and the Chuckanut Community Forest. We'll do that part of the meeting at the beginning of the meeting in April.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they consider a hold on the account.
Okay, if without any other comments by anyone, I don't think that we had a public comment period. Would anyone like to speak for 3 minutes? Vincent, would you like to speak for 3 minutes?
Yeah, we did have a public comment and no one spoke, but then I think there were a few people that joined us after that period was over. So maybe somebody would like to chime in, but I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hartnell, if you, would you like to say something?
Yeah, just a brief hypothesis to throw into the water. I wonder if, considering the magnitude of this study, if we might not get a really good cost-benefit ratio by reserving a piece of this funding to fund a graduate thesis in ecology at Western on the 100-acre wood, or two, considering the scope of the funds.
I have no idea how to respond to that.
It's
Sounds like a
certainly
great
something-
idea.
Certainly something to consider. Yeah. But I think that would be a larger discussion than what we're doing tonight, but a great suggestion. We can take it forward as part of the process with the city.
I'd suggest the answer to that is a very strong yes. But we would want to provide clear guidance as to what would go into that.
We'll leave that up to you, John. You're up at the university and you can run it with Mr. Hartwell.
Yeah.
Regarding the Park Advisory Board meeting report from John Hymas, what does
Oh.
he have to, excuse me, Vincent would like to
Wait,
speak.
I would just like to also add that whatever we do with monies after we've paid the city back, we have to be super careful on anything we spend on anything else and make sure that there's public support, because remember the lawsuits we've been through. That's all.
Duly noted. Our first obligation, of course, is to pay off the loan, right? Right,
I've got a 3-minute comment.
please.
I really am hoping that we integrate whatever we do with the 100-acre woods with the other properties that we have and make one big forest. I don't know if you guys all read the Seattle Times article on Sunday, but really, we need this. This is one of the most important things that the city can do to create a carbon sink. And if we play it right, we can tie into the state lands. We can get to the waterfront. This could all be one giant forest and a growing forest. And so I hope that whatever we do in this master plan feeds into a larger plan that addresses the other properties that we have acquired, which don't have a plan, and because of the way they were acquired, can be easily overlooked.
All right.
Sounds like a lovely idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
John Hymas, would you like to make a report as the liaison to Park Advisory Board?
For some reason, I'm not getting a response from Darla as to minutes from the meeting. So maybe John Blethyn attended and can tell us anything that relates to us.
You're dealing with a really old brain. I don't remember anything that was particularly relevant to this except some comments about this creating a steering committee. And it sounds like the steering committee will have a park board member and probably a greenway. I brought it up at the greenways committee to see if we could get some interest there. And I'm sure that they'll, normally these are heavily loaded with staff. So we're going to see, I don't know, Renee Lacroix, or I'm not sure who'll be from the public resources.
How about
But
you?
I asked to be on it. So we'll see.
Okay,
I'd love to join you.
yeah, we'd love to have you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Moving on to the monthly expenses and
Don
cash flow
Brown?
sheet. Yes,
Could I interrupt for one thing?
no,
One thing
yes.
I think it's important that we deal with at this meeting is deciding when we're going to have the public hearing on restoration. So that I can start putting that out there, whether it's going to be May or June.
I can duck goose it.
June would be better than May, I think.
I'll go along with you.
Well, I think it'd be important to have John McLaughlin there. So John, is one of those dates more likely you might or might not be able to be there?
Things for me are a little up in the air, but I would echo June is better than May.
Sounds like we
Okay.
have a consensus, huh?
Yeah.
Maybe you could write something up for me at some point that I could send out about that, John?
Sure, and to clarify again, this is a hearing on the student developed plans for restoration?
That was my understanding.
Okay.
But
All right.
Yeah, and a general discussion, I think, of both those plans and the broader issue of restoration priorities and
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll schedule that for June. Is that okay, Frank? John? Okay. We have then a monthly expenses and cash flow sheets. Robin has put forth the petty cash we have is $2,967. The treasurer's report is that unencumbered cash balance at the beginning of February was 226,977. Ending was 220,816. We received cash revenues of 2,187. We paid out 7,290 in operating expenses, and 1,058 was paid in our loan to the city of Bellingham. The outstanding debt right now is $647,271, $200.71. May I have a motion to approve the district payroll input form wages for Robin Albro, a total gross of $562. May I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Second,
Frank moves, Hugh Beatty seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Consent agenda to approve the following payments to our Carmichael and Clark Public Servants for $1,452.50 for regular professional services. May I have a motion to approve that amount?
move approval.
Frank seconds.
Frank seconds. All those in favor? Barring discussion, all those.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, 5-0. John Brown votes aye. Robin will send an email to 3 board members after the meeting, me, Frank, and Hugh, and we will respond. If there's nothing further, the next meeting will be on Wednesday, April 28th. All of
Say,
you, everyone stay safe.
hello. I was wondering when are we going to be able to meet in person?
When you get your damn shot.
I got my second jab 3 weeks ago. Where does everybody else stand?
Actually, I think that's really a question for Bob. Bob, are there criteria for when we back off from these Zoom meetings and have meetings in person? It seems like the current governor's recommendations are moving pretty quickly in that direction.
Yes. So currently, as you all probably know, we're in phase 3. And for local government meetings like ours, the general standard is that the board may meet in person if it chooses to do so, subject to a pretty long list of requirements. And so long as we can meet those requirements, we can meet in person. I believe we probably can do that because we probably have enough space at the Fairhaven Library to meet with everyone with social distance and wearing masks. That's all still required for those meetings to take place. What I could do, I'm going to suggest that we not change that for the next meeting, maybe put it on the agenda for the April meeting to decide if you want to open it up for the next meeting in May, in person. There may be a change by then anyway.
In
But-
support of that, the governor is going to review the status on April 12th. And if Bellingham and Whatcom County continue in the direction they're going, it's likely they will not meet the criteria for being in phase 3 and they will be moved back to phase 2. In fact, I would be surprised if they're not moved back to phase 2.
Oh, is that right? Okay, well,
Yeah.
you definitely know more than I do. Maybe we could just put this on the agenda for
Richard Barton.
consideration at the next meeting, but keep the next meeting scheduled virtual.
Okay, yeah.
That works.
Could I have a little quiet here, please?
Does that make sense to the board?
It makes
Yeah.
sense to me, yes.
Okay.
Frank,
And
would you like to draw the meeting to a close?
Go ahead, John. You've done a
Right.
great job. Keep going, buddy.
Can I say something?
No.
John,
Yes, we want to hear from you.
I'm getting my second shot on Monday. So middle of April, I should be good to meet with people. And I would suggest that we keep the Zoom thing going and the board could meet outdoor, let's say at the little gazebo up by Larrabee School. There's plenty of places for 5 or 6 people to sit easily at distance with masks or whatever, and anybody else could come with masks and sit around or bring a chair. And it would be outside, but it would be dry if it was raining. That's an idea, anyway, for like May or June.
It's an idea worth considering, and we'll bear it in mind. We'll all keep informed about this. Please go ahead, Vincent.
Well, if you're gonna have a guest speaker in April, and then you're gonna have a public hearing in June, I think you're gonna be better off having those on Zoom for sure. But
Duly noted. Okay, we'll have to see how it all plays out, Vincent. Go ahead, John McLaughlin.
One question, this came up from a member of the public is an international expert on many of the issues we deal with.
We want his name.
Ed Grumbine.
Okay, go ahead.
He said he was, again, this occurred while I was away. He said he was walking in the forest and found major trail building going on, including broad trails being built. Has that been addressed?
No.
I can speak to that. I did send a email to Lane this week just to see what the status was on that. And I heard back from a Parks Department employee who said that, let me find it here. Philip Evans said that the conclusion is he's 99% sure that the bike jumps are on private property,
Right.
but without a survey, he couldn't say for sure.
Great.
For 100%.
Thank you.
These are not new, and they are. It's my understanding they are on private property.
Okay, if they're where I think they are, then that's correct.
Yeah, down by the beaver ponds. Yeah.
Yep.
It is unfortunate,
Great.
I think, in that it does lead people engaged in those activities directly into the park or into the community forest. Perhaps we can address that issue more thoroughly in the future.
All right.
I want to thank everyone for coming. Again, we all owe a great debt of gratitude, not just to our council, but especially to John McLaughlin. We realize what great work he's been doing. John Blethen and John Survey, thank you very much for coming. Vincent Bichunas. With that said, we will adjourn for tonight. All of you stay safe and we'll see you in a month. Okay?
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Hmm.